Welcome back to season 2 of That's Mental TV with me, Christine Charles, and
Myself, Jessica Samba.
yes, Dream Team are back with a Dream Team panel of guests. Let me introduce them to you. Ellen Steele. Ellen, you were interviewed for last season. Thank you for agreeing to be on this season and this episode. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And you're representing the students today, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I'm a student at Nottingham.
Also, we've got Sally Baker in the house. Sally, I've interviewed you on the radio show, and you are a therapist, and you're regularly seen in and out of the media, aren't you?
That's my thing, commenting on human behaviour, however it shows up.
Well, we can't wait for today. And last but no means least, Simon Nicholson. Simon, you are representing the parents. Thank you for joining us today and just agreeing to be on the panel. And as we have been saying, you're the only bloke on the panel talking about mental health. And that in itself speaks volumes, isn't it? So no pressure.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we've got Jess in the house.
Yeah, of course. Good to see me here and around.
Yeah, Jess and I will be interviewing all of you today around lockdown and mental health and the different perspectives that you're both, all bringing, you know, from a therapist, from a parent, from a student perspectives. So we're going to kick off today's show, and Jess, the floor's yours, as Bruce Forsyth used to say.
So I wanted to kick off with yourself, Ellen, as you are a student. Wanted to know, what has the lockdown been for you guys? Has it been different depending on the different lockdowns, and how have you guys been coping with the lockdown?
Yeah, I think one massive point to say about the student experience is it's been extremely varied. I think the first lockdown, as it did for everyone, came as quite a shock. And for the lecturers, they had to work very hard to get things online extremely quickly. And I completely respect their position. But I think the difficulty we had was, well, I can only speak for myself, but I had a week extension on some of my essays and slight leniency on marking, but I don't personally think that was enough given the extremities of the situation. We're kind of expected to maintain the same academic standard as we would if we had access to all of the libraries and all of the resources and all of the general comforts that you normally would have at university or when you're studying. And that simply wasn't the case. I'm very lucky to have a happy and healthy home to go to, and I worked as hard as I could, but I have no doubts I would have done much better in a normal situation. And I think students just genuinely feel quite ignored by the government, by the restrictions, and I think their struggles are often quite sort of invalidated by the plight of other people. And I can completely respect that everyone's going through a hard time, but I think expecting students to pay extortionate amounts for an education that they're not necessarily receiving to the same standard, needless to say rent and all other expenses, is quite unacceptable, and it's been quite difficult, I think, for a lot of people.
And how have you managed your mental health in all of this, Ellen? Because, you know, you're not only, I imagine, trying to manage your mental health, but you've got, you know, your friends, the students. And so how are you managing yours and supporting each other?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in my scenario, because I'm in a final year, I have a student house, and that's where I've spent most of the lockdown, especially in the second and third lockdowns. And I think the thing there is trying to bring each other up is really important. There's a house of 5 of us here, and we do a good job at kind of making plans for the weekend, treating it as if it's almost normal, saying on Friday night we're going to watch this film or eat this dinner or have these drinks or do something fun like that. And that's been really helpful, and you'd be surprised how important those little things become. Saying we're going to have lunch together on Friday is massively important all of a sudden, and that's great. But it can be quite difficult when one person gets down, when you're on top of each other all the time. One person kind of falls down and no one else is feeling up to bringing them up. It can get quite difficult, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And Simon, you're representing kind of not all the parents because you physically can't do that, but you are a parent.
Yeah.
What's lockdown been like for parents?
I think it's been quite difficult. I think for us, like especially, because he was only 1.5 when we first went into lockdown. So it means that like for a lot of his development, he's not been able to see a lot of his family. So normally we're quite close knit with like cousins and like uncles and things like that. So now that the only interaction that they get really is over the phone with him now, it just means that you kind of have that like deep down feeling that they're missing out on a lot. Little things like you can't go swimming. and little things where you can't necessarily, you feel awkward about going to the park and like letting him play with other people. Like he doesn't realize like there's a pandemic, so he goes running over to another child or something, and then suddenly you're like, no, come on, you got to come back. And then is that going to kind of instill a fear in him a little bit later on? That kind of thing. So I think that they have had a lot of like negatives, but I think the positives for those as well is like the fact that I've been able to spend a lot of time at home because of the pandemic. So working from home has meant that I haven't got to travel to work and then come back, or different places. I'm literally with him 24/7 pretty much. So that's a little bit of a positive that's come out of it that I wouldn't necessarily have got to do. So I think there's been ups and downs with it, really.
Yeah. And what's been the worst part of lockdown as a parent for you, generally speaking, and this lockdown as well?
I think generally, again, it comes down to family. I think family is a very important like part of growing up. I know that I spent a lot of time, like I say, around like your aunts and uncles, and I'd like to have done the same with him being at this early age, so that like when they get to like 2, they start to get a bit of stranger danger, and that kind of makes you want to kind of put them in that situation so that they do have a comfortable life socializing with people as they develop. It's an important part of development. So I think that that's been one of the main issues, really.
Yeah. And you know, Sally, I know you because I've interviewed you before, and we've spoken as not as interviewee and interviewer. And I know you're going to be sitting back and really soaking in what the guys are saying, Ellen and Simon here. And from a therapist perspective, what's been tough about, you know, for the students and for the parents?
The level of isolation, particularly with students, I think there's been very little. It's been massively, in fact, absent in its that there's no duty of care from the university governing bodies, that they've been seen as cash cows, and they've been really had their mental health left put under pressure. So that's not been great for students at all. And parents, it's the level of isolation. So, you know, when Simon says about how important family, it takes a village or a family and, you know, an extended family to raise a child. And now we have couples fairly isolated with their offspring. And I can see how Simon would worry for his son's development, but also the extended family supports the parents as well and gives them a break. So this is a very, very tough time all round.
Yeah. And what trends are you seeing at the moment? We've had so many lockdowns, you know, I lose count personally sometimes. And this tier system we've had in. What trends have you seen, and how have you managed your mental health as a therapist? And, you know, you're in and out of the media all the time, you know, talking about trends and advice. And so what trends have you seen, and how are you managing your own mental health?
Okay, so one of the trends I have seen is that people have really, really got back in touch with the importance of friends. So even single people who wanted to date during the lockdowns and have been stymied because they can't, you know, it's not easy to meet people. They've been less keen on meeting new people, but really, really hankering for people they're already fond of and that they already have connections with. And it's a bit like Stuart was saying with his Simon was saying with his family. We want our people. We are hungry for our tribe. We're hungry for our people. It's a very tough time.
And so from a therapist perspective, you know, you probably spend most of your time listening to other people's mental health.
What do I do about this?
So how do you kind of, what things have you got in place for yourself, and the strategies and the tools that you use when you're having a day of, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming?
Well, I think the pandemic has meant, and the stress of the pandemic has meant, that we have got much shorter attention spans. We're less able to focus. So, you know, just being compassionate to yourself and giving yourself a break, not beating yourself up when you're not as productive. All of those people that were virtue signaling at the beginning of lockdown 1, saying they're doing their, you know, their morning yoga, they're doing their morning pages, they're doing this, they're doing that, and all of that stuff. That all faded fairly quickly because everyone was struggling to different degrees. We're all in the same pandemic, but we're in different boats, and we're all allowed to validate our struggles.
Absolutely. We're in the same storm, but in different boats. I love that.
Right.
Absolutely love it. And so what advice, Sally, would you give to parents and, Simon, who's on this call, who's with his child 24/7, and as graceful as it sounds, being with your child, I know from, my own family and friends, they need that time out and escapism.
They do need that time out. Yeah. It's very tough. There aren't any glib answers. If there were easy answers, we'd all have found them. This feels now like a marathon and not a sprint. We know that this particular lockdown is going to change and become tears again, but there isn't any clear defining date when this is all going to be over for. And it just feels like everyone is hunkering down. We've hunkered down throughout that long, cold, dark winter. We're beginning to see the signs of spring. Things are going to get better. And it's about digging deep and holding on. But there aren't any easy ways through this. This is very tough.
Yeah. And students as well, we don't want to ignore students. Ellen, you've spoken so openly and honestly about the reality of what it's like for students. And so how can we give a bit of love to the students, Sally? What would you say?
I really feel for them. You've really got to be watchful of each other, take care of each other and yourself, and watch out for the friends of yours that drop out of the group Zoom calls, that don't want to partake in the Friday get-togethers. When people start to go quiet, when people start to absent themselves, they're the ones that are really struggling. So the ones that are turning up, they're still in the game. They're still trying. They have come up with a strategy to get them through. Be aware of the people that go quiet, because they're the ones that are really, really struggling.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. Thank you. Jess, do you have any questions you would like to pitch to the guys?
Just for this segment, what do you think we need to do if we do, as you said, if there's somebody that is maybe shying away from the group, what is the best thing that we can do to include them back in? Because I know that a lot of people do struggle with talking about their mental health or would not want to speak about that side. So what would be the best thing to do to include them back into the group?
I think just being constant and consistent and not taking no for an answer. And when people say that they're fine, in the Aerosmith song, fine stood for the 4-letter word, then insecure, neurotic, and the E stood for something else as well, emotional. So, when someone says they're fine, you need to ask other open questions and dig deeper and be, but it takes, as Ellen said, it takes a resilience and a capacity within your own mental well-being to be able to support friends. And when we're all spread very, very thinly, it's a difficult thing to do. So, if you're worried as a friend about someone, share that information with the wider friend circle so that you can all pick up a bit of that and all help to carry that person while they're struggling. So it's not just one person's problem and people aren't left isolated. Yeah.
Fantastic. And, we're looking at this lockdown at the moment, and it's been particularly tough for a lot of people, hasn't it? How's it fared for you guys?
I think from my perspective, this lockdown's definitely been the hardest. Probably partly to do with it. It's cold and it's more difficult to sit outside and chat to people or go on a walk for more than half an hour without being freezing. But I think also it is that, as you said, Sally, that sense of it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's getting exhausting. It was exhausting in the first lockdown, but I look back to that time and think, oh, I was really strangely doing a lot compared to now. And I think that can be quite demotivating, but I think it's really important to remember that we're almost a year into this now, and admittedly it's not, the end might not be quite in sight, but it is getting there. And I think every little achievement is amazing. Everything is really, really good. And I think you have to kind of give yourself those rewards, give yourself that, that extra slice of cake at lunchtime because you did a good job and you got up early, or because you didn't, but because you're going to do it tomorrow. I think yeah, you kind of have to focus on those little things, and that's a really important way to get yourself through.
Yeah. And what about you, Simon?
Yeah, so I'm the same. I think that this one's been a lot more difficult because I think it's been lasting quite so long. But I think it is just literally about taking those little victories. Like for me, it's the fact that Roman's starting to talk now. He's starting to really develop all this, like getting through all these little milestones. The fact that overall, when I do get to see him talking to new people, like he started nursery recently, so that's been absolutely lovely to like hear what they're saying about how well his development's been going along. So it's just little things like that where you can really pat yourself on the back and say, look, I'm doing a really great job, even though you do still have like your parent guilt for like sending them into places and having to do certain things like that. Just every little tiny thing that you can give where you're patting yourself on the back to definitely run with it.
And do you think it's fair that they've shut schools but opened nurseries have remained open, and you know, universities physically you can't go in, but you're having to do your work online? Do you think it's fair that nurseries have remained open?
I think it's an awkward one because for me, I work with someone that works. I live with someone that works in nursery, so it means that yeah, I see why they're needed. Like for Roman's development, because of the fact that we can't socialize with people, it's really important for him to be able to go and speak to other children, to speak with different adults, and kind of work with new people and learn new things that I don't know. I'm not the best teacher. It's my first child, so no one expects you to do so. Whereas when they go into a nursery and they're developing these young people into the next generation, I think that that's really important, and they're I'll take my hats off to them. So yeah, but I also worry about the danger that they're putting themselves into. We all know that kids are germ spreaders. Like Roman will sneeze and like touch things and not even realize that he's doing that, and that's not their fault. So I don't think that it's necessarily fair, but at the same point, they're doing a really, really great job, and I think we need to make sure that they get recognised for this.
Yeah, and I think most of the country, most people are behind this. There are a few that are spoiling it, like the celebrities, and we're going to come on to those very shortly. But Jess, you have a question around lockdown, don't you?
Yeah. So as you did mention earlier about relationships, Sally, wanted to know how has you guys' relationships been affected during the lockdown?
You know, I've seen so many clients who really believe they had rock solid marriages, but this length of lockdown together has the wheels are coming off lots of relationships, and we're going to see a big increase in post-lockdown divorces because people have seen close up how their partners behave, and they don't like it very much. There's been lots of cases where couples have not shared all the domestic duties, all the constant feeding of kids while, you know, trying to hold down a full-time job, and there hasn't been a lot of fairness. I mean, some couples where one partner earns more money than the other, they've kind of pulled that and said, well, Leo, my job's the one that brings in all the money, so you'll have to deal with the kids and you'll have to deal with all the breakfasts and the lunches because my job's paramount. So it's felt that there's been real disparities and real unfairness, and we know that the lockdown has impacted hugely on the mental health of mothers and carers because they've been the ones that have in the main been carrying more of the burden. So not all relationships are equal, and not all relationships have shared the duties out together. That hasn't been great. And in social media, a woman said on social media, I didn't marry my husband so I could spend every lunchtime with him. And she's married to Piers Brosnan. And I thought, you know what? She's struggling and she's married to Piers Brosnan. So it made me feel infinitely better about me struggling with my husband. I think the new being separate, having time apart from each other, is going to be the new coming together. We need time apart from our partners to remember and appreciate how fabulous they are. And we have not had that for almost a year. It's really tricky.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing divisions at the moment starting within some homes and filtering out into society. And one of the biggest divisions that we're seeing at the moment is the celebrity culture and these influencers and celebrities that are going off abroad on holidays. And I mean, that has an impact on one's mental health, who's sat in their home saying, I could lose my job, I don't have much money, I could lose my home. And when I'm logging onto media, I'm seeing these rich, glamorous celebrities sat on a beach, topping up their suntan. I mean, what do you guys have to say? How's that affecting your mental health and in the perspectives that you're coming with? Ellen, as a student, as a parent, Simon, and as a therapist, Sally. You're in the media as well, and Jess, for you as well. I'll throw this question out to you all.
Yeah, I think it's been very difficult because in terms of celebrity culture, if we're looking at sort of the main bulk of people on social media, it tends to be, and this is a very stereotypical painting everyone with the same brush, but it does tend to be younger people. And I think what then happens, what I've seen is people say, oh, look, there's an example, a single example potentially of a young person exploiting the rules and not doing necessarily the morally right thing, even if there is a technical loophole there. And people then say, oh, that's a young person, therefore that's young people, therefore that's students, and you kind of almost come at you, attack you, and saying, oh, this has nothing to do with me. I've been sitting in my house for the last however long, and it becomes quite difficult because I feel like you're constantly fighting to prove that something isn't you, when actually it almost should be the other way around. It should be people, proving themselves why they've done the right thing, if anything. And I think it kind of does open up a real facet for hate towards lots of people, even towards people doing those things, whether you think what they're doing is right or wrong. I don't think opening a channel of everyone sharing their opinions online and hiding behind a screen is ever necessarily a positive thing. And I think it's very easy to get sucked up in that and kind of feel like you either need to defend yourself as not part of that, or you need to have a say on it, otherwise people think you're agreeing with it, and it becomes sort of an endless spiral of just debate that I really don't think if at any time is useful, but especially right now when we're all just trying to get through the day to day. So I think it's been quite damaging to a lot of people.
I agree with Ellen, but also what the celebrities failed to do was take the temperature of the room. So when influencers are dependent on their income stream, on the number of followers, they've been unfollowed in their droves because people are really miffed that they've gone. They were dishonest as well. They kind of tried to hide where they were instead of just kind of stepping up and owning it. So I think it's been they've shot themselves in the foot, and it won't be forgotten. In fact, on Twitter there was a list of everyone who behaved badly during lockdown and companies that have behaved badly, and there's a sort of there's a day of reckoning coming where we know who our heroes are and we know who's let us down, and we're going to put praise and put attention to the ones that have behaved better than some of these other people.
Absolutely.
I think that's the other thing as well. I think it's your social responsibility effectively when you're in the limelight to kind of show a good example for other people to follow. I know that it's a lot of weight that goes onto celebrities' kind of shoulders, really. I mean, when you look at people like Marcus Rashford and things where they've been doing so much for communities at the moment during all the COVID lockdowns, and like helping all those families and things, you've got to think when you are looking at the people that aren't doing the right things, where they're like going to parties and everything else, then there are repercussions for your actions. Every action has a consequence, don't it? So I think that will show in the future as we start to see that they lose, like you say, like Sally was saying, they lose their followers, and then eventually it causes them a problem later on when they want to make moves that people don't want to let them do because of the actions that they've taken when they were younger.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But it's about taking responsibility as well, isn't it? And bringing it back to mental health. We've shared some real golden nuggets today about how we can take responsibility for our own mental health, and that will impact us and those around us. Any last bits of words of encouragement from you all before we leave today's episode?
Just the idea. Sorry, Ellen, carry on.
Oh, sorry. No, I think just to reiterate what we said before about having those little victories, I think it's really important. And remember, if this course said anything, it's that everyone, as you said, everyone's in the same storm in different boats, but also everyone's doing their best or hoping to. So just keep going, really.
Fantastic.
And it does feel as though we've dug deep and we have found inner sources of resilience and extra capacity we never even knew we had. The first lockdown was sort of really feeling our way. Unprecedented was overused as a word, but what it really meant, we had no idea. And it's almost like we're quite seasoned now at lockdown, and this will not last forever, and we will get out of this.
Absolutely. It's learning the lessons from last lockdown and what we did differently. And like you said, Ellen, we've got longer days coming now, and it's just being hopeful and truthful. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of That's Mental. Sally Baker, I know there's going to be people going, I need to get hold of this lady's work. Where can I go? Where can people go, Sally?
So my website is my website is Working on the Body, workingonthebody.com.
And we're going to put a little link on workingonthebody.com as well. Simon and Ellen, thank you for joining us today. This has been a fantastic That's Mental episode, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.